spectacular, sensational episode of Radio Rocketman, your favorite political show.
Spectacular.
Spectacular. But we've got a lot of stuff to go through, a lot of political news, a lot of some economics, some jokes, smeared all around. But with that, I want to welcome the one, the only, my co-host. Hello, George. How are you doing, sir?
Hello, I'm doing great, Luigi. Smeared like a freshly produced pile of manure. I'm doing well, Luigi. How have you been this past week?
Been less than pretty mediocre, to be honest.
Pretty mediocre.
But
an average week.
But it's going to be an above average, a 9 out of 10 week for our podcast, sir. I can already feel it. I'm in good spirits.
Excellent. I had a good week. I finished on the last few episodes I've had to watch of Attack on Titan. Not the new episode that came out a few days ago, but the last season. And interesting stuff. Very interesting. I'm going to recommend the show. The show shall be recommended with the caveat that it's a beautiful show where everyone is a fascist because some people can turn into titans. This is my review, Luigi. Spoiler free. Whatever. Well, season 1 spoilers.
it rhymes with the real world, though, because almost everyone is a fascist.
And they can't even turn into titans.
And they can't even. But we do have big, scary weapons that essentially serve the same role.
Indeed.
Imagine DeSantis with nukes. I mean, isn't he a pretty scary titan?
Imagine DeSantis on a nuke surfing towards your coastline. Jesus Christ. That is a dreadful thought.
But yeah, the show Attack on Titan, for anybody that has no idea what we're talking about, go check it out. It's an animated series, but it's definitely worth it. All right. And now that we have done our promotion, the funny thing is Attack on Titan is not paying us.
Nah, only Ted Cruz is paying us, people. Fuck you, Teddy.
Ted Cruz is paying us in oil diluted with the tears of young refugees.
Yeah. Baguettes of it. We get paid in baguettes. So legit. Should we in political news, Donny boy, the orange one, bigly orange one, stable genius, etc. Huge. He had his CPAC address. There was another CPAC. They've got a lot. You see, once a year, it feels like it's more than once a year. But this one was a bit, I think Fox News pulled out of this one. I don't know. It was a bit weird that DeSantis did not go to the CPAC this time. Neither did Mitch, neither did Pence. Pence was not there either. Donny Boy was there. The Titan was there. All the good people were there. And I've got a brief summary of Donny Boy's speech. It was one for the history books again. Basically went a bit like, when I was in charge, everything was so great. So great. It's unbelievable. A big, strong friend of mine, businessman, the strongest, biggest guy you've ever seen. He came up to me, he said, "Sir, Mr. President, sir."
Mr. President.
All my friends address me as Sir, Mr. President, sir. How do you do it, sir? Every day they're trying to take you down. I said, "You're strong, you could do it." "No, sir, I wouldn't be able to get out of bed in the morning, but I am a martyr and I do it for you. Thank me. I'm so awesome. Thank your president. I stopped every war on the planet through my stable genius, and I will once again drive out the globalists and the warmongers. You know, people like John Bolton, who I appointed as my fucking advisor.
Evil walrus.
I will drive them out just like I appointed them as my advisors. Now everything is so bad, Luigi. We are in a communist state of mind. There are no borders. Immigrants are raping our women in the streets. Marxist junkies are brainwashing our children, changing their genders. Perverts are pushing people down train tracks right as the train is arriving. And Joe is leading us straight into oblivion. Oh, Joe. We all watch him falling down on TV. It's cute. You know, when he fell on his bike, the reporters didn't even grab him. They just let him fall. It's amazing. That's a brief, I made a brief summary of the speech.
But your royal Donaldness, you didn't build the wall. Where's our
He
wall?
did. He's promised more wall, I think. The original section. We built for more years. And at one point, I think he also said that he threatened the Taliban with nukes.
Of course he did, man.
He did, yeah. He claims that he has spoken to the leader of the Taliban, who is a guy named Abdul, by Donny's telling. He said, Abdul, if you kill another American, I will gonna hit your country harder than any country has ever been hit before. That's the N-word, isn't it?
You will know it, Abdul. You will know it. The skies will rain fire, and I will be responsible, and there's going to be more fire behind that fire.
And I mean, at that point, the crowd exploded into ecstatic chants of USA, USA, which made me realize that this is a tricky situation we're in.
I mean, to be fair to the average American, that when you've heard, like, I don't know, a culture being demonized day in, day out for a couple of decades, I imagine, like, it gets rooted pretty deeply. Think of sentiment towards the Russians 30 years ago or 40 years ago, and think of anti-Middle East sentiment 2 decades ago, or even
a decade ago, I would say, yeah.
Before completely descending into
chaos.
I was going to say the depths of the American sewage of politics. Should we get on with our regular coverage, sir?
Yes, of course. All
right. What do we have on this fine occasion, except for the Donald?
Except for the Donald. Before I get into what has happened with the Northern Ireland protocol, just a little thing.
British news.
Just before we get into British news, just a little thing. He made an argument in his meandering, crazy speech that the Democrats, by closing the Keystone Pipeline in Alaska, that they caused the war because otherwise oil would stay at 40, 50 a barrel and Putin wouldn't be able to launch his war. Financially wise, which is the most ridiculous bullshit. One pipeline, people get a fucking grip. Then he blamed the Afghanistan pullout because then Putin saw that Joe was weak. You can tell that the whole thing is bullshit. He has claimed he will solve the whole thing in a day. And I imagine that means forget about Ukraine. It's going to be Russia. No.
He's going to solve the whole thing the moment he presses the button not to send any more tanks.
Yeah, it's by allowing Russia to take over.
Yeah.
He doesn't elaborate on that point, Luigi.
I honestly don't think he would actually do that because, like, the pro-Ukraine anti-Russia sentiment is so strong in both parties. You think he
couldn't get away with it?
Yeah, even the great Donald couldn't get away with that. It's like being for China. It just doesn't play well with current sentiment.
You say that that it's strong in both parties. I'm not certain how strong it is in the Republican Party, Luigi. I would say 50-50 at this point. Yeah, you've got people like Mitch McConnell, obviously, Lindsey Graham, obviously, but a few others, a few younger ones as well, I forget the names. But the hardcore Trumpists are definitely right behind Trump on this. And Trump is basically on, who gives a shit about Ukraine? We've given enough aid. I would say 50-50 the Republican Party, Luigi, which is strange because the Republicans never saw a confrontation with Russia that they didn't like until Trump got into the scene.
Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking too. Like the Republicans, the last thing the Republicans ever do is look weak. And the easiest way to look strong is by being super aggro on foreign policy.
It's true. There's a bit of a contradictory dissonance there. It's going to be hard to thread the needle. But I think Trump sort of represents a new approach to this shit. Trump loves the dictators. He loves that they're so strong.
So strong.
So strong.
Touch their muscles sometimes. They're so strong.
Vladdy, you've got amazing biceps. Thank you.
Have you been doing squats? You look a little bit taller.
Oh, you've lost weight, Kimi.
Must be all those missile battles you're pressing.
Yeah, definitely. Lots of exercising, pressing those buttons. But I don't know. It's interesting, the Republican direction. And Trump doesn't have a philosophy. It's basically how last night's chicken nugget got digested. That's how we figure out the policies. Before we get into DeSantis, which I agree, I think that he's equally bad in different ways. A bit more establishment Republican, that one.
More common sense Republican, which honestly might not be the worst thing, but like, it also means that
he's a Republican is pretty bad, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it basically means free reign for business, lower taxes, got every.
Very interesting you say that. Yeah. The only left-wing economic thing that Trump spoke about in his more than an hour-long speech was not increasing the age of Social Security, and he also attacked every other Republican on it.
He could also attack every other country on it. Everybody's raising it. It's the only way the system keeps going. And the classic bullshit argument you always get is, oh, mon ami, but life expectancy is so much higher today. We have to raise it, because people live longer. And the system will go bankrupt if we don't.
And because, if you want to get into this, they refuse to accept immigration. So how are we going to fix the imbalance? It's pretty much an impossible problem, isn't it?
And by the way, there's a huge imbalance. You listen to Fed officials lately, and here's the paradox with what's happening economically right now. You had the whole pandemic, shock to supply chains and all that, a little bit of inflation. And with that came all of the stimulus, and you really got some inflation. And now the central banks are trying to raise interest rates to bring down the inflation, but inflation is not coming down easy because you cut immigration. So when you cut immigration, there's less supply of workers, essentially, which basically means inflation is going to be that much harder to bring down. So they are raising interest rates further than they would have done under a regular immigration policy. And with that comes a greater risk that they do real harm to the economy. And I'm just mentioning this for our audience to see how everything is essentially connected. When you mess with immigration a little bit, that comes back to bite you economically in some occasions, like right now.
For the inflation, though, I'm going to put a massive amount of the blame on monopolistic practices that has allowed these corporations, massive multinational corporations, to not only keep their profit margins, but increase them using the excuse of inflation. Yes, their unit costs have gone up, but they've raised the margins far higher than that.
Yeah, it's true. Corporate margins are at an all-time high, or recently.
Let's explain to the audience what that means. It means that, yes, costs are increasing. For your average mom and pop store, small businesses, they're going under because electricity bills, etc., are off the charts. For the big-time multinationals, the increases in unit costs are nothing compared to the increases in the price levels that they've actually implemented to not only keep their profit margins, but to increase their profit margins.
Yeah. So profits as a percentage are at an all-time high, which basically means what George just said.
And they're selling less volume. Sorry, Luigi. They're actually selling, most of them are actually selling retail goods. They're actually selling less volume. But because they have raised their prices to such levels, their profit margins are going up.
Yeah. So Bernie Sanders refers to this as corporate greed, but I don't like that description because corporations have always been greedy.
I agree. People have to understand this, that this is the function of a corporation. Unless you regulate a corporation appropriately to not allow it to do that, it will do it because that's what it's set up to do.
Yeah, it's its mission, maximize profits. But what has changed is that they are able to do it today because we spent the last 4 decades
because our politicians
deregulating everything.
Because our political system has fucking collapsed.
Because of money in politics is the ultimate answer. But
everybody's in a very hard place. But as you said, immigration as well, because of the anti-immigrant sentiment, all-time highs in Europe and the United States.
Yeah, and you know what? Like some countries are still taking in a lot of immigration. Canada being the shining example.
By the way, I checked, Luigi. He can't. Murdoch hasn't got a single news product in Canada. Maybe that's related. You said immigration in Canada is high.
Yeah, so the US, I think, pre-pandemic used to take in something like 2 to 3 million people a year. Now, for a population of 340 million, that's basically less than 1% per year. But Canada today, Canada is a country of, I think, 30 million people or so.
That's
and
very low.
they're taking in 1 million people per year.
Which
That's
is much
3%.
higher.
That's
Yeah.
3% of the population per
lot.
year. That's a lot. Still nowhere close to Europe during the heights of the
After the
whole
Syrian
immigration,
thing,
of the immigration crisis, but still quite a lot. And in Canada, that's creating a different kind of problem because when you get so many workers, you basically get a housing bubble because they're not building houses.
You can't build you're not building the houses fast enough.
So immigration is a very complex issue that for it to work economically, you need to balance a fine line, not too little, not too much. Otherwise,
and not listen to people that give you idiotically simplistic answers like we're gonna build the wall.
Or it's gonna be at least 5 feet tall.
Man, and they keep going
Nobody
on.
can jump
Every
over it.
goddamn Republican with Trump at the helm can't shut up about open border Democrats. Who the fuck are the open border Democrats, Luigi? Which Democrat is an open border? I've never heard this thing before. I've never heard a Democrat being in favor of, what the fuck is open borders, by the way? Anybody? Do Americans genuinely believe that anybody who wants to come to the United States can come to the United States? That is mind-blowing.
I can guarantee you it's a long process. In any case, I think we've stayed on this subject too long. Let's go in rapid fire mode.
Let's go rapid fire mode. Let's do a little bit of a dive into what's happening with unions in the United States and the National Labor Relations Board. The PRO Act that Biden at some point championed never came to be anyway. But that act would have given the power for the board to actually fine companies for illegal practices. But of course, the PRO Act never came to be. So the National Labor Relations, we hear all the time this past few years with the increased unionization effort that's happening in the United States. We've been hearing about the extreme lengths that huge multinationals are going to discourage and illegally destroy those attempts, basically.
Starbucks, big
shout out to Schultz. We remember him.
Shining examples.
We remember that deep shit in the debate stage as well.
He actually ran for president. What an asshole.
Yeah.
What an absolute asshole.
What an absolute asshole indeed. And I've got an article here about these increased efforts to bring down. But one of the problems is that it hasn't got enough teeth, the National Labor Relations Board. And it's, of course, been underfunded to hell for the past whatever decades. Chipotle has been accused of illegal retaliation.
You don't say.
Apple has been accused of illegal spying. Apple store workers, Trader Joe's.
It's the norm.
It's insane.
If you're a corporation, you know that labor laws are not enforced and you can just fire anyone that tries to unionize. You're gonna do it because you can't do it.
But don't get full on illegal practices. Just, a store in Starbucks unionizes, immediately the store is closed down. Then that's illegal.
By the way, I've got another related article. Bernie Sanders, the chairman of the Senate's Health, Education, Labor and Pensions Committee, he basically tried to force the CEO of Starbucks, Schultz, to testify.
Subpoena him.
Because he refused he declined to appear before the Senate, saying something like, rather, he basically said, "I'm stepping down as CEO, and there's gonna be a new guy next month, so I'm not the most qualified. I don't know, the appropriate person to appear before the committee. Here's my public relations officer." You're like, Bernie Sanders literally replied, and I really want to find the actual response, but it was something like, "Mr. Schultz will remain as chairman of Starbucks Group and its founder and a very influential official long after he steps down as CEO." Therefore, therefore, come over and appear, and he tried to subpoena him. I don't know how
Bernie is increasingly enraged by Schultz's behavior regarding union efforts, anti-unionization drive. Under federal law, employers can't be fined for illegal delays or bargaining in bad faith. The PRO Act would have sought to overcome the lengthy delays by providing that if the two sides fail to reach a contract within 120 days of a new union being certified, a panel of arbitrators would be appointed to decide on the terms of the first 2-year contract. It would also allow substantial fines against employers. That's the PRO Act. That has never been passed yet. That hasn't been passed yet. Because it faced a filibuster and unanimous Republican opposition. We go back to the Republicans cannot be a pro-worker party. They can be a fascist party, but that's going to go down in flames in the end. But they cannot be
theocratic fascist party.
100%.
That is the fear.
That is the fear of the whole world, by the way, my dear Americans, because what's going to happen to the rest of us when the most powerful country in the world goes fucking ballistically insane, draped in a flag and holding a fucking Bible?
The best case scenario is like they go isolationist again.
That's the best case scenario.
I think those days are long.
I agree, Luigi. Those days are long. The world is too interconnected for that to happen anymore. Too many interests in too many places.
Let's face it, the US is the global police.
Empire.
Sorts.
The current empire of sorts. We've got a few stragglers who refuse to submit. China. But give or take the world empire at this point. That was there. I've got a tiny little bit of news. The FBI director endorses the COVID-19 virus, that the COVID-19 virus may have leaked from a Chinese lab. The FBI came out and said, and then the World Health Organization came out and called on the US to share information. And I agree 100%. Fuck you, FBI. If you're not going to show us the evidence, I don't give a shit, man.
Well, I actually listened to the interview by the head of the FBI. He basically said, we have, I don't know, my virologists, microbiologists.
My microendocrine biologist.
Micro and macrobiologist.
Of quantum mechanologist.
The point, though, is...
He analyzed the matrix.
If they're saying it so confidently, chances are they do have the evidence.
I don't know, man. I think they're trying to stir shit, as always.
But I mean, if the FBI was trying to stir shit, it would have done it 2 years ago when the subject was still hot.
Maybe. Who knows, to be honest. And I agree with some people who have said that we'll probably never find out. I mean, that ship has sailed. It's already got too politicized in the United States. Therefore, China, which already wouldn't want to allow any sort of inspections, let's be honest, of what has happened.
No, not even as a joke, man. Australia supported...
Said something, I remember, and China
They supported a global independent inquiry into the origins of COVID, and China went economically nuclear.
No. They sanctioned the fuck out of them. They erected trade barriers.
They tariffed, trade barriers. But like Australia depends on China. Basically,
let's say, dude, Morrison. It was back then when the far right moron was in charge. It wasn't the slickest of political operatives, because you were gonna say that that Australia is dependent, let's say, on trade with China,
100%.
And then that guy just went and nuked it because he was a legend.
You know, there's a lot of other things that you Australian things where you just like hold your head. It's like Australia had a deal to buy, I don't know, like 5 nuclear submarines.
Oh, that was a big deal, yeah. Macron is very pissed.
And they basically cancelled that. And
I piss in your wine, Morrison. I piss in your wine. I give you this wine and there is some piss in it. Mine.
No, drink it.
Tra-la-la, now drink it.
Yeah.
Bon anniversaire, dickhead.
Here's the funny
I don't know what I'm doing.
They cancelled that order, and they ordered American.
Another one example of his sleek political operating.
and I was basically listening to someone say, all right, so let me understand the whole relationship. So Australia trades with China for 50% of all its trade, and you're buying nuclear submarines because you are afraid of who? The Chinese. So your biggest trading partner,
it's ridiculous,
you are afraid
right?
is going to invade
I mean, Australia and New Zealand, and New Zealand already does, but Australia as well should be a bit more. And I think Albanese is far better at this. You know, you should be a bit more sleek politically, considering your location in the world. You're not exactly on the other side of the world. China is right there. They're your biggest trading partner.
Yeah. So
you shouldn't get as hyped up as the Americans get about these things, because the Americans, one day they may not be there. They may be dealing with their own shit on the other side of the planet, and then who's gonna fucking come?
Is Australia a member of NATO?
No,
it's
but
not.
Whatever, honorary shit, like the Eurovision stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, that's really funny.
Honorary Europeans, yeah.
But honestly, I say that because I remember when things were heating up with China and those islands in the South China Sea.
Yeah.
Like the Americans used to do a whole, oh, look, it's not just American warships passing through this region.
Yeah, we've also got an Australian ticket.
Yeah, we've got a British one here.
Yeah.
The Chinese.
Oh, by the way, the British one barely works. I mean, I can tell you that.
Chinese went ape shit at the British when that happened, and then they went way more ape shit against the Australians. Yeah, so
and they could get far more punitive with the Australians as well, because of the links that they share, because of the geography. Yeah. I've just seen that up to this point. I think the next guy as well is not an idiot or something. I think they've handled that relationship far better. Without completely sacrificing your dignity as well. Yeah. So nobody's saying be lapdogs to China, but don't needlessly antagonize as if you're the United States.
Keep your mouth
fucking
shut.
Australia, mate.
Mate.
You're not the States, mate. And crikey,
mate. But maybe keeping your mouth shut is
a little bit more. Yeah.
Sometimes the preferred route, the strategic route,
the right port of call, mate. I've got an interesting piece of news, Luigi, about, since we were talking about China, that in an attempt to stimulate China's flagging housing market, banks in some cities are extending the upper age limit on mortgages to between 80 and 95 years old. And these relay loans are supposed to pass on to their children in the event that they obviously die, because they got a loan at 90 years old.
Intergenerational loans.
That's intergenerational debt. This is very, very fishy, dude.
Got more news on China. So China.
This is very fishy.
We've covered China's real estate market 1,000 times. It's called deleveraging in economic circles, which basically means you got on a lot of debt and now you're about to blow up.
Yeah, and what do you do?
You try to rein it in as well as you can, but the process is painful. It takes several years. And the classic response of the government, the knee-jerk reaction.
You try and separate the really toxic, unpayable parts from the healthier parts.
Yeah, that's one solution. In China, it has always been just stimulus your way out of it. Just
print more money.
But print money, spend money, just stimulate your way out of whatever mess you got yourself into. But at some point, that
and at a rising interest rate environment as well.
Yeah, so
isn't that harder to pull off?
Definitely. But in a sign that the Chinese actually recognize that, we had the yearly...
There was another one, right? Another meeting.
There was the National People's Congress once per year. It's happening this week. And in its opening day, they basically announced that they are lowering the target for economic growth in China to 5%. So the government, the Politburo...
Which I assume is closer to 2 or 3% in actual terms, right?
Yeah, last year it was 5.5%, I believe, but they only got 3% growth. That's according to their own data, which is internationally.
And this is what I'm trying. Yeah, this is what I'm trying to figure out.
So
the real actual growth rate of China.
By lowering their growth target, it's A, an acknowledgement that we are probably not going to hit it, and B, a sort of nod to investors that I'm not going to do the whole extreme stimulus thing. I'm going to be a little bit more measured about it this time, because I do recognize how much debt I already have. And when I say debt, a lot of people are going to Google, China debt to GDP or something.
And then it's going to be fairly low.
It's going to be very low. Yeah. The reason is the Chinese government takes on its debt through local governments and private entities, because there are no real private entities in China.
You got to check private debt. And by the way, I love the degree of esteem you hold our listeners, that you think they're going to Google it.
But
Very interesting. Go on,
what I
yeah.
was essentially saying is when the Chinese government does stimulus, it takes from the debt, it just doesn't take it on its own balance
Very
sheet.
interesting. And there is no, I mean, there is a private sector, but obviously the tentacles of the Chinese government are everywhere.
But like the private sector and the public sector in China are so intertwined.
It's very
You
difficult
can't-
to figure out who owns what.
Yeah.
And whenever there's a private guy, they disappear him for a while if he gets too uppity. So
Yeah,
there's that as
if they
well.
criticize the regulators too much or something like that. But
Can I include a silver lining that I read in this article that for all the woes in China's property sector, a low ownership rate is not one of them. Their home ownership rate in China is 85%, which is very high compared with 66% in the United States, for example.
yeah, that's great. And I mean,
that is not bad. That is not bad.
The problem is like there's a cultural angle to this as well. Like the Chinese don't really trust their system. Therefore, they've never gone all
for
in.
good reason.
Never gone all in on the stock market.
I mean,
example.
for good reason, because sorry, Luigi,
yeah.
it's not their system, it's Xi's system at this point. So I mean, yeah.
The point is, if you don't really trust the system, you don't really want to invest in stuff like, I don't know, stock markets. You want something tangible that the government is not going to take away from you. And like they found that in real estate. And basically the thinking for 3 decades now has been, if you buy a house, its price only goes up and you're gonna invest in your house.
And let's be honest,
that's
been the thinking in a lot of Western economies these days, especially the more degenerated ones, the ones that are degenerating at an accelerating rate.
Yeah, so while we're on China, final piece of news, billionaire cries at... Right, so there's...
give us the newsies.
Mark Mobius is a billionaire hedge fund manager that invests in, developing markets. And
henceforth, he shall be called Darth Mobius.
Darth Mobius, and he actually looks like a Sith Lord as well.
That's why I said it.
Darth Mobius, like a year ago, came out and said, the environment for investing in China is perfect. He probably got fucked. He probably got fucked on his investments.
I hope Chinese stocks
fell quite a lot, like from last year, but they've rebounded recently. But the piece of news I've got is this angry billionaire is basically saying, I can't take my money out of China because of the country's capital controls. And
you knew that, bitch. You knew that when you put your money there. Yeah.
First of all, you should have known. You knew that. Secondly, hello, China does capital controls.
Welcome to China.
Welcome to China.
Enjoy your steak. Try the chicken chow mein. It's really good.
Like in the order of importance, like of what is each person.
I love the billionaire tiers, I'm not gonna lie.
like the hierarchy of who gets to keep their money in China is like Xi at the very top.
Definitely.
I don't know, like
he deserves it, the great leader and all.
The Politburo just below. Everybody else, like the whole Chinese population,
and then it's you.
A few insects, like at the very, very bottom, and then it's Darth Mobius.
The pandas as well. They're very important, and Darth Mobius is way down the list. Yeah, and as it should be. Praise China.
All right, I didn't see the conversation going there, but sure.
The conversation goes where the conversation goes.
So I'm gonna end the Mobius stuff with this. So
Go
this
on.
is from Reuters.
Nice.
Mobius, who calls himself the Indiana Jones of emerging market investing.
Oh my god! Yeah.
Indiana Jones just called panda fact.
Bunch of pandas did their thing with Indiana Jones.
Did him dirty.
I love that. One final note, Luigi.
Yeah.
I mean, one final note. I want your thoughts on this. Marianne Williamson has announced her bid. Do you remember her?
Hippie Democrat, wannabe president. Am I doing this right?
I will allow you to characterize it however you wish, Luigi.
Look, she's actually not bad. Like the stuff she says is not bad, but the delivery is like I'm listening to a hippie that stayed in Woodstock.
You think
It's
she's
like
a bit hippie-ish? I mean, I support her too. 100%. It's just going to be difficult. Let's be honest. I mean, we shouldn't lie. It's going to be very difficult because Biden.
it's gonna be
They're
impossible.
not
difficult.
gonna do the debates. They're not gonna do debates. The Democratic National Committee has already indicated that the party doesn't plan to hold debates. It's gonna be very difficult.
If Biden runs.
He hasn't announced yet, yeah.
He hasn't officially announced. And when Bernie was asked if he might run, he said something like, "For now, the plan is that Joe Biden is running."
Yeah,
probably.
That's very interesting.
But like he left the door open in case Biden doesn't run. And
the sanctimonious meatball might announce pretty soon. He hasn't announced yet. The meatball is still stewing in its sanctimony. Marianne Williamson has announced. Nikki Haley has announced. Ooh. Has Pompeo announced? Who gives a shit? Donny, of course, has announced.
That's gonna be so legendary. Those debates, like
you are agitating for them.
I'm honestly for bringing back like medieval style debates.
Me
like
too. 100%. They can choose a weapon and then they can do whatever they want with it. Yes,
exactly.
Yes.
Trial by combat.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes. I mean, you will find no disagreements here.
And
the weapons are gonna be interesting. I want Ted Cruz holding a large purple dildo.
spiked dildo.
This is how I defeated the commies. It's gonna be epic. But we've discussed Trump. We're gonna finish up like a circle. We're gonna go back.
I like it. It's like a Christopher Nolan movie.
100%. But we're gonna go back to Attack on Titan then, because that's how we started it. Beautiful show. I would recommend it. I'm not gonna lie. I preferred the initial seasons from the final ones, but it was very, very nicely thought out. The whole development. It's amazing how the first season has nothing in common with the last season. By that point.
It's also that, like, the sense you get when you watch that show. Like the first few seasons are just complete utter despair, and as it goes on, you just start to appreciate the plot more. And like it's the only, not movie, but like it's the only series, it's the only anything I've watched of all the things I've watched. It's the only thing that actually made me feel emotionally disturbed.
Wow. I'm gonna call it the best series about fascists I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. We can wrap up with that.
All righty then. Excellent session, Luigi. Thank you for everyone who has stayed on, who has listened on, and who will now move on with his life and await the next episode.
See you next week.
Bye-bye. Sayonara.